Hello, America. I'm Eric Bollings in for Glenn. He's in Israel today. He'll be back tomorrow. But today, President Obama, fresh off his bin Laden victory lap, has put the immigration debate back on the front burner. He offered a speech and grabbed a photo op with the border city of El Paso, Texas. So let me get this straight. Gas prices are spiking, up 116% in the last 2 years. Unemployment raging with 14 million people out of work in America. Bank sales account for a record 34% of all home sales, and America is choking on $14 trillion in debt that threatens the republic. Yet immigration is his focus. Some leadership, Mr. President. Listen to what Mr. Obama had to say about his efforts to secure the border just moments ago.
They wanted more agents at the border. Well, we now have more boots on the ground on the southwest border than at any time in our history. They wanted a fence. Well, the fence is now basically complete. All the stuff they asked for, we've done.
Sure sounds like a campaign stop, doesn't it? We thought so. So we asked the man who's on the front line of the war on illegal immigration. Paul Babu is the sheriff of Pinal County and co-chair of BorderSheriffs.com. Sir, thank you for joining us. So you listened to it. Sir,
absolutely.
By the way, you're there. You see what's going on. What Mr. Obama portrayed versus what you see, do they match up?
Absolutely not. He's been listening too much to Janet Napolitano, who's been saying the border's more secure than ever before, and they're divorced from reality. The president should have come to my county, the #1 pass-through county in America for drug and human smuggling, and we had 219,000 illegals last year alone that were apprehended. The Border Patrol says almost double that number got away. So how is that a secure border? We have as few as 75, as many as 100 lookout or scout locations on mountains from Mexico through Pinal County, just in one of the smuggling corridors, from cartels that ensure safe passage of their drug loads. So this has happened in America. The response we got when we asked for help is we get teams of lawyers sent to fight our state, further undermining the rule of law, and then they put up these insulting signs in my county that said danger, warning, travel not recommended, drug and human smuggling, armed gunmen, basically warning our American citizens that certain parts of our own country are not safe for travel. So this is unacceptable. The president is making this purely a political launch for his reelection.
Sure.
To make it that.
What I want to ask you is, there are other things besides the drug lords that are coming across, or at least
yes.
You allege that there may be other things. We just captured bin Laden, we killed him. Are terrorists, is that a risk?
Well, if the majority, the overwhelming majority of simple illegals can make it through our unsecured border without detection, what do we think about people with military training or those that are sleeper cells, part of terrorist organizations, that the 9/11 Commission has warned us at great length that's their plan of the enemy of America, is to slip into the United States somehow and lay in wait for commands from afar. There's no better place than to come through our unsecured border with Mexico.
And Sheriff, I remember 2.5 years ago when the immigration debate was really heating up during the campaigning, you were on TV, you were saying, we need a lot. We need more than just, I don't know, a few border agents and maybe a few bucks. What exactly do you need?
What we need is 6,000 armed soldiers to be deployed to the border for 2 years to immediately stop the flow of not just illegal immigration, but the drug smuggling, the cartels that have resulted in 35,000 people killed, with the government of Mexico fighting the cartels that has nearly toppled their government, and to stop them from coming across. And we build this double barrier fence across about 700 miles of the 2,000 miles of border. The president's simply wrong. He's the one who stopped the fence from getting built. We've hardly built any fence. So he doesn't even have the facts straight. And then the third in sequence, what we need to do to secure the border, is this novel concept called enforcing the law. We have to prosecute anybody who comes across and breaks our laws, instead of the president apologizing for America like everything is our fault.
Right.
The reason why Mexico, the guns, all these issues is just stop apologizing for America and start defending and protecting America.
Sheriff Paul, stay there for a minute. Let's bring in Fox News political analyst Juan Williams. Juan, is this a political maneuver to get the sliding Hispanic vote back on Obama's side? It's been 2.5 years since he even addressed this issue. Now he's doing a photo op and a handshake in El Paso. Sheriff Abu, right across the border in Arizona, says, hey, where have you been?
Well, he's been, look, the fact is that this is politics, and it's big-time politics way beyond Arizona's border. I mean, this is politics about 2012. President Obama and his team have been in meetings since February, Eric, dealing with the immigration issue and trying to reassure Hispanic leaders in Washington that they are committed to trying to get some immigration reform through the Congress before the 2012 election.
All right, Juan, fine. However, here we are. Like I said, 14 million people out of work. Gasoline prices raging, almost $4 a gallon. $4 a gallon in 14 states in the country. Home sales. 1/3 of all homes sold in America are foreclosed home sales by the banks. Yet this is the issue that Mr. Obama thinks is front and center right now.
Oh, it's a big issue, Eric. I think you're wrong. I think, look, I mean, we got a lot of issues in the country, but I would say immigration might be 1 or 2 or 3, so it's up there. I mean, clearly, you've got 12 million illegal immigrants in the country right now. And you've got issues in terms of big business saying, we can't get the kind of people we want into the country because of immigration laws. And at the same time, you've got people who are involved in so many of the factories, immigration, people who help with farm labor, factories, saying we need those people to come in and do work.
Okay,
and the question is, should you penalize those people, or should you just penalize the immigrants? That's a big issue.
Or, Sheriff, there are 11 million. Juan points out, I think what Mr. Obama said 11 million was his number today. 11 million illegals in the country with 14 million people out of work. Wouldn't it be better to close the border off and maybe get some of the illegals that are here now, get them back over on the other side of the fence?
Well, we cannot be in the business of rewarding people who have broken our laws and reward them with a path to citizenship or citizenship. There's been millions and millions of people who are awaiting their turn for visas and work or student visas or citizenship. We don't defy the rule of law by placing these people who have broken our laws in the front of the line. We have to maybe absolutely fix our immigration process, but we got to secure the border and stop this from happening, because we're going to repeat this cycle time and again.
Hey, Juan,
and one last thing for us.
Sheriff, I have to get to Juan before we lose the satellites. Hey, Juan, we're broke. America's broke. We have $14 trillion in the hole. We're trying to figure out what's going on with health care. If we had 11 million or whatever number that he's proposing, if we had 11, 10, 5 million more onto the health care rolls, onto, it's taking the jobs from people who need jobs, this can't be good for the economy any way you slice it.
Eric, come on. You know that he's not adding those people to the cost of health care in this country. And that's the thing that, remember, the congressman yelled out, you lie, and he was proven wrong. None of that, health care coverage does not extend to illegal immigrants.
Well, no, but if there's amnesty, if there was amnesty, it would, Juan.
No, it would not, Eric. And in fact, you know what? I mean, the reality is, and this is something
I think there's education that was being floated. I think health care is being floated.
Hey,
there are
Eric,
a number of things that were being floated.
Eric, this guy could be your neighbor. Some of the presidential candidates, they've already discovered they're the people fixing the law, and they're the people who are educating their children, caring for their ailing parents. That you aren't going to throw 11 or 12 million people, I remember, out of the country. You got that many buses, you got that many handcuffs. It's just not practical, Eric.
All right, Sheriff Abbey, real quickly, last word, sir.
Well, how about this? The fact that just this month we had a shootout, 15 smugglers versus bandits. One guy's dead. We can prove the guy was in a shooting. Another guy shot in the gut. We arrested 6 smugglers. This is 70, 80 miles north of the border. This is going on quite often out here. We had 370 pursuits last year.
Sheriff, isn't that, Sheriff, you're confusing issues. That's a drug war, and as you said, it's almost destroyed the Mexican government, and it sometimes comes over our border. But that's not an immigration issue.
That's why we got to secure the border.
All right, Sheriff,
all of this is connected. We should look south.
Sheriff, we got to leave it there.
Right
I'm sorry to cut you on. We have to leave it right there. Thank you both to Juan Williams and Sheriff Paul Abu in Arizona. Thanks, Juan. All right, now it's time to get serious about securing our country's border. That's the advice from my next guest, 2012 GOP presidential hopeful, Mr. Herman Cain of Georgia. Mr. Kane, thank you for joining us. You've had some great ideas. You've mentioned some great ideas, sometimes even jesting, joking about them. But let's hear your ideas about securing the border.
First of all, Eric, we need to work on the right problems. This whole immigration issue is not one problem, it's 4 problems. Secure the border. And the way I would secure the border is like the sheriff mentioned. We need to secure the border with technology and guns. If that takes 6,000 armed agents on the border, we ought to do that. Number 2, enforce the laws that are already on the books. We cannot ignore what the definition of legal is. If we do, we're going to become a lawless society, just the way Mexico is becoming. And as the sheriff pointed out, this isn't just happening south of the border. They are so brazen that they are doing this north of the border in the United States of America. Number 3, let's make it easier for business to hire people that we know are here legally. Enforce, promote the path to citizenship that's already here. We cannot continue to turn a blind eye on this issue. We've got 4 issues. And the fourth component of my whole approach, empower the states to do what the federal government is not doing and what the federal government will not do. President Obama's remarks that you had at the top of this show is an illustration that he is not only out of touch with what's really going on, but that he has absolutely no intentions of getting serious about making it a priority, empower the states, like Arizona is trying to do to protect themselves.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because number 2, you said enforce the law. And then number 4, you said empower the states to do what the federal government isn't doing. And then you have Governor Brewer last night mentioning she's going to have to take this case to the Supreme Court, the case that the White House is suing Arizona over SB 1070. Weigh in on that, will you?
Yes. First of all, it is ridiculous that the federal government sued Arizona to begin with. And secondly, now that Arizona has to use the time and the resources to defend themselves and to prove that they are doing what they have a right to do to protect themselves, this is just creating another distraction, which this administration is really good at. You know, like you said earlier, the only reason that the president is trying to make immigration an issue right now, it is to distract from failed economic policies, distract from the recent news that the unemployment rate had gone back up to 9%, distract from the fact that there are things that he could do about helping to stabilize gasoline prices if he were to announce an aggressive drill here, drill now plan. This is just another diversionary tactic to get most of the people focused on things away from his lack of solid common sense solutions for all of these other issues that we face.
All right, let's talk about a couple of the other issues. You know, you've had some stellar approval ratings jump since the South Carolina debates last week. Talk to us a little bit about what you would do about that, what I mentioned earlier in the show, a $14 trillion debt that America's saddled with.
I would do 2 things, Eric. First of all, we've got to stimulate this economy. And I've already laid out and mentioned my 5-point plan for stimulating the economy. Not indirect stimulus, not more government spending, direct stimulus. We've got to lower the top corporate tax rate from 35 to 25%. We're the only nation on the planet that hasn't done this. And we also must bring down the top personal tax rates. It worked in the 20s, it worked in the 60s, it worked in the 80s. It'll work again in this decade. Number 2, take capital gains tax rates to 0. Yes, 0. Stop punishing the people who are taking the risk in investing in new businesses. Number 3, suspend taxes on repatriated profits. Those profits that have been generated by multinational companies overseas, those profits are going to stay there until we stop penalizing money that comes back home. Number 4, give the American worker and the American employer a real payroll tax holiday with a 6.2% payroll tax holiday for a year for the employee and the employer. Those are direct stimuli, Eric. They have worked throughout history. And then here's the 5th thing that we do. Once we put all of these in place, make the tax rates permanent. We've got to remove this veil of uncertainty off of this economy if we're going to get it going.
I like the last one. Look what's happened since President Obama went ahead and signed Bush tax cuts 2 years into the future. Look what's happened to the market. The economy is actually growing jobs for the first time in 2 years. And that only happened. It lines directly up with, perfectly up with the signing of that bill, extending the Bush tax cuts.
But Eric, that growth would be a whole lot more if we couple that removing the uncertainty with those other measures that I talked about. And then if we do that, then what I would do as president is I would do a horizontal cut across the board of about 10%, and then I'd do a vertical deep dive. This is what CEOs do. This is what leaders do. And you go into each agency and identify programs that are outdated, programs that are not working, or programs that have overlapping with other things. Figure out what we can afford, and I believe that we could put a big dent in helping to bring down this national debt.
All right, Mr. King, we only have about 30 seconds or so. Would you allow the debt ceiling to be exceeded in America? Would you vote against raising the debt ceiling?
I would vote against raising the debt ceiling, and here's what I would do instead. Identify those critical things that we need to make sure we pay, and then we cut wherever we have to cut in order to not to raise the debt ceiling. Let's make sure that we pay the interest on the debt that we owe, make sure that we take care and pay our military and their families. Thirdly, let's take care of people who are living off of Social Security. And if we do those three critical things, then we can take a look at everything else in terms of where we need to cut. Well, it might mean a furlough of federal workers, which is not a bad idea.
Very quickly, Mr. Boehner last night mentioned that he would be interested, he would be allow a debt ceiling raise if there were equal cuts in spending. Is that fair?
It's fair, but it is another stall tactic. Quite frankly, I'm disappointed with Representative Boehner for putting that on the table. This Congress has shown that it does not have the ability to stop spending. I think that they are just avoiding the tough choice. Don't raise the debt ceiling, pay for the stuff that's critical, and then the other things are going to have to be forced mandatory cuts.
There it is, a few minutes of common sense with Mr. Herman Cain. Thank you very much, sir. Up next, the Democratic solution to soaring gas prices: repeal oil and gas subsidies. Really? We'll talk about real solutions on how to ease the pain at the pump with a former oil company executive. That's next. Dog or fill her up. Mr. Obama, simply put, has no clue on how to reduce gas prices. If you take his word for it, our current rate of oil production is higher than, quote, ever before. Listen.
Sometimes I get letters from constituents who say, why aren't we just drilling more here? We're actually producing more oil here than ever.
Sorry, Mr. Obama, you're absolutely wrong. How can you make this claim? You can't be serious. Or is this another case of fuzzy math from Mr. Obama? Or maybe something entirely more sinister here at work? Let's break it down for a second. One of the highest years for domestic oil production was 1970. We were producing 9.6 million barrels per day. In 2010, we produced just over 5.5 million barrels per day. Last time I checked, 9.6 was more than 5.5. It's 4.1 million more, but he says we're producing more now. And if you're still not convinced, take this chart directly from the Department of Energy. It says it all. Look at this. 1970, 9 million barrels a day. 1986, 9 billion. It's a declining slope all the way to 2008. We've lost nearly 43% of our total production. Joining me now to make sense of all this is former Shell Oil President, Mr. John Hofmeister. John, we've had the Energy Secretary, Stephen Chu, tell us that $8 gallons of gasoline are probably a good thing because it would get us off of dependence on oil. We've got Mr. Bromwich, who runs the Minerals Management Service. He has no idea what the production is going on in the Gulf. What's with the Obama administration? Is this selective fuzzy math? What are they up to?
Well, I think when I retired from Shell, the last thing I said to the board of directors in London was, look, we're probably going to have a different president who's going to be anti-hydrocarbon. And the anti-hydrocarbon president is going to make sure that the costs in the U.S. go up for hydrocarbon products because his funders, the people who back him, want to see high hydrocarbon costs because it makes alternative energy look like it's not so expensive. But it is. I also told Senator Obama when he was running for office, if you don't drill more oil in your first term, you are going to face ungodly gasoline prices when you run for re-election. That was in 2007. This is 2011, and guess what? He's facing ungodly gas prices because he didn't drill in his first term.
On the way up, he didn't drill. Let's talk about the EPA for a second. There are about 40 or 50 boutique fuels around the country required by the EPA. It depends if you're on the West Coast, the East Coast, if your climate is warm, if it's cold, if it has high altitude. Why all the different boutique fuels? Do we really need that many?
Well, the EPA has all these regional centers, and bureaucrats do what they do. They write regulations. So we have all these multiplicity of standards for different parts of the country, which really, I mean, the atmosphere doesn't know state boundaries. The atmosphere moves all over the country. We could get by with about a half a dozen standards, meet the air quality the nation needs.
And what would that do to the price? Wouldn't that allow refiners to refine, I don't know, 4 or 5 fungible fuels?
Well, one of the reasons that people always have price increases around Memorial Day is we're kicking in the summer standards in different parts of the country, but they're not the same. They're all different. So refineries have to put additional costs into how they manufacture gasoline in order to meet those requirements that the EPA puts on them.
All right, John, $103 a barrel, $104 a barrel. Does that, I mean, I can hear right now, the left is going to go, oh, there's plenty of oil, it shouldn't be 103. But does that 103, today's price for oil, reflect today's price or the value that people perceive going forward, a price for forward oil?
It has an impact from the future. Today's demand is not equal to the supply. In other words, there's more supply than there is demand. But people are very worried who buy oil in the future that there's not going to be enough, so they're willing to pay more to guarantee deliveries. Here's what's going on. The whole world is watching what China is doing. That is, the whole world that trades oil. China is going to go from 9 million barrels a day today to 15 million barrels a day consumption by 2015. That's 6 million new barrels. Nobody knows where it's coming from. China does. China is loaning billions and billions of dollars to state-owned oil companies to make sure they have oil when they need it. They're not going to look out for the global trading market. They want to guarantee their oil deliveries. So $25 billion to Russia, $23 billion to Nigeria, $10 billion to Brazil, $16 billion to Kazakhstan. These are big numbers, but they're going to guarantee they have oil.
There's about an 83 million barrel, right now we use and produce about 83 million barrels. Is that right or so?
It's closer to 86.
86 million barrels. So if China steps up and needs 6 more million barrels, where's it coming from? Saudi Arabia, maybe 1 or 2?
Well, maybe. But here's what we could do in the U.S. And I said this to Congress last February. We have more oil than Saudi Arabia, for Pete's sake, in this country. Let's go back where we used to be. Let's go back to the 10 million barrel level. We use 20. So we'd only be at half of our consumption if we produced 10. I said, in addition, you raise $20 billion in new royalty for the federal government, which helps the deficit. You create 3 million new jobs in this country. Everybody's talking about jobs. The unemployment is 9%. For Pete's sake, we're not making jobs in this country because we have an administration that refuses to produce domestic natural resources.
If we went from 5.6 million barrels a day to 10, how many more jobs would there be available? What kind of job creation?
We're looking at between 3 and 4 million jobs. Easily. New jobs, American jobs, high-paying jobs with benefits, not service jobs with no benefits. But we can't get the administration, and the Democrats in the Senate are more worried about tax breaks than they are about consumer prices at the pump.
So jobs go up, price of fuel goes...
Jobs go up, price of fuel goes down.
Goes down. Everyone around here, when I walked in the room, said, hey, Boling, what's going on with the price of gas? I said, don't take my word for it. Up. I've said up for the better part of 3 years. Take John Hofmeister's word for it. Price of fuel.
Price of fuel, I think this summer is going to be around where it is now because there's some uncertainties out there and the geopolitics seems to be, but that could change any day. $5 next year. I said 6 months ago, we're looking at $5 gasoline when we go to the polls in 2012, sure as we're sitting
and
here.
Very quickly, the mighty Mississippi River is cresting right now. If it floods, if it overflows, there are some refineries in the path of some of that water. Is that a risk to, in fact, higher prices?
Yeah, from Baton Rouge all the way to New Orleans, there are a number of very large refineries that are at risk. The levees should hold. They're taking steps to relieve the pressure by opening up gates before Baton Rouge. Hopefully we'll be okay.
But there's some big refineries down there, right?
Very big. And it would really dent daily production. And we are living somewhat hand to mouth. I mean, everybody talks about the inventories at Cushing being very large. No, the number's large, but remember we use 20 million barrels a day. Sure. It doesn't take long to use up that inventory.
All right, John Hofhäuser, thank you very much, my friend.
Thank you.
All right, is the federal government flexing its muscles to help its union buddies again? That's what some South Carolina lawmakers are saying about a decision that could jeopardize 1,000 new jobs in their state. Find out why next.
To the U.S.-Mexico border this afternoon, he renewed his call for comprehensive immigration reform. The president vowed again to push for the DREAM Act in Congress. Fox News has learned the Obama administration will allow selected senators to see the photos of Osama bin Laden's dead body, but only if they go to CIA headquarters to view the pictures. And in Memphis, Tennessee, the Mississippi River has crested, washing away crops and damaging homes. Now other states downstream are preparing for flooding over the next couple of weeks. You can read more about President Obama's trip to the border on foxnews.com. The Glenn Beck program returns in a moment, but first, Brett previews special report. Hey, Brett.
Hey, Patty Ann, coming up, Washington reacts to the president's immigration reform speech. Brett Hume is here with analysis. And the president's health care law goes to court again. Please join me in 26 minutes for a special report. Now back to Eric in for Glenn.
Boeing, the world's largest aerospace company, wants to start production at a new $2 billion manufacturing plant in South Carolina this July. That plant would create more than 1,000 jobs, but the government's National Labor Relations Board is trying to stop Boeing because this new plant would be in South Carolina, a right-to-work state, instead of in Washington state, where labor rights are the law of the land. So here's a company who's trying to create jobs, but is getting a roadblock from the White House. Let's bring in my good friend Verge Bonero, the mayor of Lansing, Michigan. Verge, do you support the NLRB's decision?
Well, I support the law, and I support people having an opportunity. You know, I was brought up to believe that you reap what you sow, and what Boeing has sown is seeds of discontent. I mean, let's tell the rest of the story here, Eric. Let's be honest. This is a company that gets just got a $30 billion contract from the federal government, gets a lot of its proceeds and profits from the federal government. This is a company that made over $500 million just in the first quarter of this year, and yet pays its workers $11 an hour. Starting pay is $11 an hour. That's a little more than $20,000 a year. But the CEO of the company made $20 million, 1,000 times,
you know
1,000 times the average worker.
It's a free market. It's a private business. They can pay their CEO whatever the heck they want. You or I should have no problem with it. The only one who should are shareholders. Let's get back to the issue, the labor issue. What in the world? Why does the NLRB have an opinion about Boeing opening a new plant in South Carolina?
The NLRB
they
has
already
an
have
opinion.
a plant in Washington state.
The NLRB has an opinion and a role in how workers are treated. And I want to live in a country where workers have rights and can choose to form a union if they wish. You know, I don't wake up in the morning and say, WWPD, what would Putin do? I want to live in a country where people have rights and people have freedom of association.
Does the NLRB have a right to tell Boeing how much profit it can make?
Well, of course not.
Well, that's what they're doing. They're saying
the point
you can't hire workers at a lower wage in South Carolina. You need to hire them in Washington state, or we can get our grimy little goonian hands on you and raise your wage.
I don't think that's what they're saying. I think what they're saying is that workers have rights, and I think they've made a legal finding of fact that workers are being punished for their union activities. And I want to live in a country where people have the right to belong to a union without fear of reprisal. Now, maybe that's not the America you envision, but that's the America I want to live in.
No, the America I envisioned is a free market America like South Carolina says, right to work, pay them what you want, do what you have to do.
Well,
build a plant here, hire 1,000 people, spend $2 billion in our state.
Wonderful.
That is the market. That's what's going to bring the economy back. Not pretending to have a false wage level like Washington State or Michigan.
Boeing was warned well in advance that there was going to be problems, that they should not proceed because they had an unresolved labor issue in Washington State. They chose to go ahead. Their investors, they made that decision. Now, that's their decision. They'll live with it. They've made their bet. bed. But I say let's look at the rest of the story. These workers, while Boeing's profits were soaring, the workers went without a pay raise for 6 years. Now, I'd like to know how that would work with you, Eric. If you went without, if you went, let me finish. If you went without a pay raise for 6 years, if you went without a pay raise for 6 years, you'd probably switch over to MSNBC.
You know what else comes with profits? Taxes. And that's exactly what you need. The taxes are what's paying all those federal salaries, all those federal unionized workers. Listen to this. If you're in a union, all wages considered, $917 per week unionized, $717 non-union, same workers, 28% higher. Is that fair?
I'm not sure what you're talking about because I'm not looking at a graph.
According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, if you're in a union,
are you saying
you're
that
paying 28% more than if you're non-union.
Well, you're saying that union workers pay more taxes?
No, my point was about Boeing paying more taxes with profit. I'm saying the union model raises wages artificially.
I disagree. Unions have raised everybody's wage. They didn't just raise the union wage. They raised the non-union wage. That's how we got a middle class in this country. And now, interestingly, when the unions are down to about 7% of the population, interestingly, the middle class is under attack, being eroded.
Why
and
is
the rich are getting richer. Why is it? Because you're allergic to the term "share the wealth." You think it's socialism.
I'm allergic to that term.
Yeah,
you're right.
I don't know where you come from, because the fact is that's what created the middle class in this country.
No, that's what created Marxism, not
here's
capitalism.
A fact. I don't want to confuse you with the facts, but let me give you one. The average CEO used to make 30 times what the average worker made. Now it's 300 times.
And
what's happening is the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting poorer, and the middle class is being eliminated.
And who should tell us what that ratio should be? You, Virg? You, Mayor of Lansing, Michigan? By the way, how's it working for Lansing, sir?
What I believe in is a country where people can choose to form a union if they so choose, and they don't have to worry about being punished for it. Now, I know you prefer emerging markets like China and Russia, where they have authoritarian governments.
Let's stay in Lansing,
authoritarian governments that keep people down so they can pay their people dirt and pollute their environment and get away with it.
Do you or do you not have a budget gap this year?
Of course I do.
And what are you going to do about it? What are you going to do about it, Virg?
Well, for 5 years I've been cutting, and I'm going to have to go right on cutting and trying to do what's right, trying to provide the best services I can. I've cut my pay, and I've cut the pay of all my top people, and I'm negotiating with unions. I'm negotiating with the unions.
Go ahead.
And reopening their contracts so workers to get concessions.
To lower the wages, right?
I'll have no choice.
See, well, you're contradicting yourself, Virg. On one hand, you're telling me raise the wages, send the people to Washington State, don't go to South Carolina, but you're saying I have to cut wages.
Here's a little difference for you, Eric. Now, see if you can follow the money. Boeing is making record profits. I just got through telling you Boeing made $500 million in the first quarter, and they made continuing profits. And while their profits were soaring, they refused to share the wealth with their workers.
Are you going to raise taxes?
I put that up to the voters. The voters said no, so the answer is no.
Fantastic. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you, Virg Bonero.
Good to see you.
While Osama bin Laden is no longer a threat to the U.S., his death is opening up a whole new set of terror concerns. Should we bring back the water bucket? And is Pakistan really a friend or an enemy in our war on terror? We're going to debate all that after this. The Pakistani government, the same government that we've given nearly $20 billion in aid to over the last 10 years. Meanwhile, we got this warning from Pakistan's Prime Minister Yusuf Gilani yesterday.
Let no one draw any wrong conclusions. Any attack against Pakistan's strategic assets, whether overt or covert, will find a matching response.
Gilani then tried to save face for his country by saying we shouldn't draw any, quote, wrong conclusions. Joining me now on how the U.S. should deal with Pakistan is Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, and Ahmed Rehab, executive director of the Chicago office of CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations. Dr. Jasser, please tell us about that. That sounded fairly, I don't know, angry, insightful when the Pakistani foreign minister said, hey, if you come into our airspace, you may meet our helicopters.
Well, this is all, Eric, it's all posturing. They got their hand caught and slapped. They had, within their confines, either they were complicit or they have absolutely no control over what's going on in their own borders, and now they're trying to make up for it by posturing. And I think we need to reassess exactly the formula we've been using, which is you're either our friend or our foe, and it's just a binary equation, and we realize that it's much more complicated. We may have common enemies with countries like Pakistan that we may work with in the short term, but in the long term they're harboring ideologies of political Islam and ideologies that are actually threatening our society and our anti-Western, anti-liberal democracy, and will never be our allies. So we have to work to separate countries like Saudi Arabia that foster Wahhabism, but yet we may want to work with petroleum, etc. So we have to be careful to change the paradigm from friend and foe to a continuum of those ideologies that threaten us and those that may work with us with a common enemy.
Mr. Rehab, we're scheduled to give $3 billion in aid to Pakistan this coming year. What do you think? What does CARE think we should do about that?
Well, I speak for myself. I'm not a fan of giving aid in the billions to any foreign nation, whether it's Pakistan or Egypt or Israel, who receives the largest amount of aid from the United States. I believe that we can have diplomatic relations based on mutual interests, and I believe that there is no country in the world that we need more than they need us. And so at the end of the day, I would have to say that Pakistan is neither a foe nor a friend in this war on terror. I think it's been helpful in some ways. There's stuff lacking, stuff to be desired still to happen in terms of the relationship, in terms of going after the terrorists.
Dr.
And that's what we need
Jesser,
to put pressure on.
I'm sorry, Dr. Jesser, what should our response be to the Pakistan government, knowing that Mr. bin Laden had been sitting under their nose for 5 years directly next to one of their military academies? What should we be saying to them?
Well, I think we need to reassess the relationship and say, you know, we're done throwing cash at you, but we're going to have deliverables. We're going to be involved in partnerships. If you look, the Bush administration developed millennium accounts for countries in Africa where we had pay-as-you-go criteria, where we said, you know what, there's going to be deliverables. I think it would be wrong to turn isolationist because those countries are already headed in the wrong direction towards Islamism, towards theocracy, which will create ideas that are against the West and continue to propagate conspiracy theories and a population that doesn't believe in working with us. So if we're going to work with them, we need to help them build institutions, work hand in hand through partnerships that are measurable.
Go ahead, sir.
As I listen to Zuhdi Jasser speak here, he's one of those far-right individuals who's trying to make this war against Al-Qaeda into a larger
ideological war. How about you stick to the subject, Ahmed, and talk to substance?
That is the subject, Zuhdi, because that's exactly what you're trying to do here, and I have to call you out on it. And the fact is, you've been a sock puppet for the axis of Islamophobia in this country.
more personal attacks instead of substance.
Everybody who supports you hates Islam for a reason. Look,
oh my gosh, this is wonderful.
Ahmed, you think this is about pro-Islam? We're not out to
guys,
we're out to fight Al-Qaeda and apprehend terrorists.
Guys, fellas,
Mr.
Rehab, hold on for a second. Go ahead, Zuhdi, respond, please.
There is nothing more pro-Islamic or pro-Muslim, Ahmed, than those that want to defeat theocracy. However, you and your associates that believe in theocracy want to push theocracy down the throat of Muslims all over the world through the Brotherhood movement and other aspects of political Islam. And you want to say that you represent...
Guys, we have to leave it here. Fellas, we have to leave it here. We're running out of time. We'll bring you back for another segment. Hang in there. Are we sending a mixed message? Just cut the mic off. Are we sending a mixed message when we want the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, and Ahmed Rehab, executive director of the Chicago office of CARE. Guys, let's turn our talk about the enhanced interrogation techniques that were used on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed that ultimately led to the capture and kill of Osama bin Laden. Dr. Jasser, why not use all forms of interrogation if it leads to the capture of some of the most dangerous people in the world?
Well, I think that's a great question. And this democracy and transparency, we talk about these things. And I think we need to look at what we got as a result of waterboarding and the fact that we can't be sanctimonious and say that we will not use any forms of coercion. I mean, what are we going to use? Harsh language? At the end of the day, we have to be transparent. It doesn't mean we can use all forms. It doesn't mean we turn into thuggish societies like Syria that is now using torture to get Facebook passwords. We're getting data that was used to capture the most wanted criminal in society. And I think ultimately we need to reassess that sanctimonious blanket, we won't use torture, and realize that, you know, war is messy, and there may be times in which we have to use things that transparently we say are part of the coercion we need to do.
Now, Mr. Rehab, Chris Wallace on Fox News Sunday had a great question. He asked Mr. Donnellan, you know, if it's okay to shoot someone in the eye and kill him, an unarmed man, why is it not okay to waterboard him? Where is CARE on waterboarding and the capture and kill of Osama bin Laden? Can you square those two?
Look, the difference between us and those whom we fight in the form of Al-Qaeda and other militant radical groups is that we are a nation of values. We're a nation of laws. And in the fight to maintain the upper hand, we can't lose our souls. We can't lose our principles and our values that make us worth fighting for. At the end of the day, torture is torture. By any other name, it's still torture. And the problem with that is it's been proven time and again that it does not provide accurate information. It has led us into a war in Iraq that was completely misguided, that wasted a lot of money and spent a lot of lives.
Hang on, sir. I
based
apologize.
on false information obtained through torture.
Before I lose a segment here, Dr. Jasser, the head of the CIA, Leon Panetta, point blank said waterboarding was one of the techniques used, and it aided in the capture of bin Laden. Any questions?
No, I mean, I think ultimately we have to realize that the Judeo-Christian and in Islam, we believe that there's just war. And if you're unless you're a pacifist, you have to believe that ultimately targeting individuals, morality is going to win over evil by the use of some force and coercion as transparently necessary. We're transparent with it, and I think it was moral. We got bin Laden with it, and ultimately we just have to be transparent and clear about it. But to say that we're not going to use it at all is naive, as the...
but as
very quickly, sir, very quickly.
As Jews, Christians, and Muslims, we also believe in the honorable fight. We also believe in fighting in a way that does not
we have to leave it there, Dr. Judy Jasser and Mr. Ahmed Rehab from CARE. Thank you, guys. We'll be right back.
Out with the old and scratched up. The dentist, the ding, and
Facebook page. Keep the comments coming. Thanks for spending the hour with me. You'll see Glenn back here tomorrow night. Good night, everybody. Hello, America. I'm Eric Bollings in for Glenn. He's in Israel today. He'll be back tomorrow. But today, President Obama, fresh off his bin Laden victory lap, has put the immigration debate back on the front burner. He offered a speech and grabbed a photo op with the border city of El Paso, Texas. So let me get this straight. Gas prices are spiking, up 116% in the last 2 years. Unemployment raging with 14 million people out of work in America. Bank sales account for a record 34% of all home sales, and America is choking on $14 trillion in debt that threatens the republic. Yet immigration is his focus. Some leadership, Mr. President. Listen to what Mr. Obama had to say about his efforts to secure the border just moments ago.
They wanted more agents at the border. Well, we now have more boots on the ground on the southwest border than at any time in our history. They wanted a fence. Well, the fence is now basically complete. All the stuff they asked for, we've done.
Sure sounds like a campaign stop, doesn't it? We thought so. So we asked the man who's on the front line of the war on illegal immigration. Paul Babu is the sheriff of Pinal County and co-chair of BorderSheriffs.com. Sir, thank you for joining us. So you listen to it.
Absolutely.
By the way, you're there. You see what's going on. What Mr. Obama portrayed versus what you see, do they match up?
Absolutely not. He's been listening too much to Janet Napolitano, who's been saying the border's more secure than ever before, and they're divorced from reality. The president should have come to
the campaigning. You were on TV. You're saying we need a lot. We need more than just, I don't know, a few border agents and maybe a few bucks. What exactly do you need?
What we need is 6,000 armed soldiers to be deployed to the border for 2 years to immediately stop the flow of not just illegal immigration, but the drug smuggling, the cartels that have resulted in 35,000 people killed, with the government of Mexico fighting the cartels that has nearly toppled their government, and to stop them from coming across. And we build this double barrier fence across about 700 miles of the 2,000 miles of border. The president's simply wrong. He's the one who stopped the fence from getting built. We've hardly built any fence. So he doesn't even have the facts straight. And then the third in sequence, what we need to do to secure the border is this novel concept called enforcing the law. We have to prosecute anybody in my county, the #1 pass-through county in America for drug and human smuggling. And we had 219,000 illegals last year alone that were apprehended. The Border Patrol says almost double that number got away. So how is that a secure border? We have as few as 75, as many as 100 lookout or scout locations on mountains from Mexico through Pinal County, just in one of the smuggling corridors. from cartels that ensure safe passage of their drug loads. So this has happened in America. The response we got when we asked for help is we get teams of lawyers sent to fight our state, further undermining the rule of law, and then they put up these insulting signs in my county that said danger, warning, travel not recommended, drug and human smuggling, armed gunmen, basically warning our American citizens that certain parts of our own country are not safe for travel. So this is unacceptable. The president is making this purely a political launch for his reelection to make it that.
What I want to ask you is, there are other things besides the drug lords that are coming across, or at least you allege that there may be other things. We just captured bin Laden, we killed him. Are terrorists, is that a risk?
Well, if the majority, the overwhelming majority of simple illegals can make it through our unsecured border without detection, what do we think about people with military training or those that are sleeper cells, part of terrorist organizations, that the 9/11 Commission has warned us at great length that's their plan of the enemy of America, is to slip into the United States somehow and lay in wait for commands from afar. There's no better place than to come through our unsecured border with Mexico.
And Sheriff, I remember 2.5 years ago when the immigration debate was really heating up during the